This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at the BatmanUniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
In 2008, a podcast was created with one goal: to bring Bat fans around the world news related to movies, comics, video games, television, merchandise, and so much more. And now, the Batman Universe Podcast has returned.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the TBU podcast. We have another special episode this time around. This week we have an interview that Scott did with the writer of Batman Wayne Family Adventures, CRC Payne. If you are unfamiliar, you probably need to get out from living underneath your rock, because the Batman Wayne Family Adventures series that is currently on Webtoon is a great series that gives a little bit more emotion and feeling and character growth to the entire Bat family than we typically see in our monthly comics that we get. The Webtoon is available, like I said, on the Webtoon app. Scott will talk a little bit more about it, but if you haven't checked out Batman Wayne Family Adventures, definitely do so. And then we also have reviews that Ian and Steph put together in a unique format that's not like our typical comic reviews over on the website as well. So without further ado, let's throw it over to Scott for the latest interview from the Batman Universe.
This is Scott with the Batman Universe Podcast, and today we have an amazing episode for you. Joining me is CRC Payne, writer of the hit Webtoon series Batman Wayne Family Adventures. Working alongside artist Starbite, Payne is currently penning Season 2 of the series. As of this recording, there are 66 episodes available on the Webtoon app for free, with new episodes updating every Thursday. For those who upgrade the Fast Pass, there are currently 74 episodes available. And then for those reading, you don't need me to tell you that it's a fantastic and heartfelt series featuring fan favorite members of the Bat family, as well as surprise appearances. Right off the bat, welcome to the Batman Universe. It's great to have you join us. I'm excited. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. I am, any opportunity I have to talk about Batman, I'm so excited. So this is going to be fun.
Fantastic. I am looking forward to it. And, I know we just were briefly mentioning before recording, but this series is honestly, it's great, and I love how you strike this fantastic balance between humor and heart, and it's definitely a series that's refreshing and stands apart from a lot of, Batman comics in general and, current Batman appearances in the print books. So my first question leading into it would be, how do you keep the tone consistent, and how do you know when you've struck the right note when you're penning these?
That's a good question. First of all, I have to give a shout out to our amazing team, because they're part of how all of this magic happens. And I think a lot of how the tone comes across and how both those moments, of humor and heart, as you said, come across a lot of the times does come down to the expressions on the face or the way that the comic is colored, even the background details, all that kind of stuff plays into it. So it's very much a collaborative effort. But from a script writing perspective, I'm really just looking for human moments. I mean, things that anyone in theory could experience, but are heightened by the fact that, a lot of these are teenagers, or some of them are even younger than teens, and they are highly trained vigilantes, black ops skills. And so I'm just looking for those moments where it's like, this is funny, but now it's even funnier because they all know how to, hack each other's laptops, or can get into a fist fight over this and show off amazing martial arts skills and things like that. So just finding those balance of things that are what's real and what can we take to this new level because of who the Bat family is.
Yeah. And, one of the things, you talk about like the relatability and everything in those human moments, in the past, I guess we'll say season and a half now, but you've covered this wide range of like topics, from like, kind of like normal school age things or like sibling things to, and family dynamics to like relationships and slice of life issues to dealing with, some of your heavier topics of like trauma. So how do you and the team, choose these topics and how do you approach tackling them, once they're on the table?
Yeah. For the more personal character arcs that we have been doing, like you said, we have tackled some pretty heavy issues for a slice of life humor comic. Really what we're looking for when we start to write those is, okay, what's an issue, first of all, that is something anyone might go through. And then we want to make sure that it's also deeply personal to these characters because they have such rich backstories, every single one of them, that we want to make sure that if we're going to tackle an issue, it is something that is relevant to that character. We're not just picking something at random. And then as we dive into it, we're looking at taking definitely a real approach to it. We want to treat them as if they are real people. And how might that look if they were experiencing something like this? With the added lens of then you have to bring in the superhero stuff that sort of shades on top of it, balancing these dual identities and things that they may have learned or experienced in the past that might either be helping or hindering them in working through this issue. So there's a lot of layers to it. And we often are going through, several rounds of just the script, just getting input on it, making sure that we are being really sensitive to these issues if we are covering something serious, and just trying to just be as compassionate as possible when we approach things like this.
Well, I mean, that really carries through. There was some, the one that always jumps to mind. Granted, I just did a refresher and I went through all of them within the last few days. So, but it stuck with me the first time was and I think it's because, the way you handled it, it was something that like, in like the actual print, like comic book world, like you might hear comic fans, kind of groan at the idea of like Jason Todd's background, with the whole Joker thing. But the way it was handled in, Wayne Family Adventures it was very new and fresh. And it felt like, it was coming at it from this different perspective with, Batman's interaction, with Jason in that scene. Just, it was very, very much full of heart. And I think, something you mentioned earlier, the relatability, it kind of took that out of, the comic world a little bit into something that's more of I guess everyone can gravitate around with their own issues.
Yeah, I think something that we see a lot of the times in comics is when the heroes go through these big events or things that are difficult for them, it's often a very isolating incident, and it is used to drive the story forward as a way for, them as a hero to overcome this thing to reach their goal. But from the very beginning, we knew we were writing a family-centered comic. It's all about their relationships. And so immediately when we're looking at things like Jason's backstory and how he might be handling that in the present day, in the context of obviously they have pretty tight family dynamics in this comic. This thing that might have been an isolating incident if we were looking at it from a, heroic journey perspective, now becomes a relationship centered story. And so we get to look at what happens if, Jason has a panic attack and his family's right there. What do they do? Do they know what to do? Do they know how to help him? What does he need from them? What does he need to recover? And so things like that really change the whole tone of the story because the focus of it is different right from the very beginning. I'm really proud of how that arc in particular turned out. I think it, just from start to finish, was a really beautiful and challenging comic to write. I know we went through multiple drafts of that one just to make sure the pieces came together the way we wanted them to. And it was a really just rewarding experience to see that and be able to tell that story in a way that, so often poor Jason is the black sheep of the family. And so it was nice to get to see him be with his family in that moment that he needed them. Because that's always so rewarding when we get that in the comics. I personally love seeing that in the comics when, there are things that drive the Bat family apart, and then all of a sudden they come back together and they work together. And I always love that. So it was nice to be able to bring that back in.
Yeah. And it was, you could tell it was very well handled, reading it. It's, just so, for how much space, you guys have per issue, it was very well done. It comes to, since it is a family-centric book and you have so many characters, do you guys have a guidebook or kind of any sort of, reference that you share to keep the characters placed? Because it's kind of like, it feels like on Webtoon that's their own canon. Like there are some things that like everybody knows, but there are also, each character is on a journey at a different space than, people coming off of comic books might be anticipating them at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of started way back at the beginning as we were figuring out all the pieces of this. We had a couple meetings. We were sitting down and trying to figure out, okay, what version of the characters are we going to use? There were so many details in that decision because each character has multiple superhero identities. Within those identities, they might have slightly different versions of themselves, different costumes and whatnot. So we had a lot of meetings where we were sitting down. We're just, okay, at what point in their lives are all members of the Bat family? And we definitely decided to skew them a little bit younger, just because we wanted a lot of stories about growth and family and those sibling dynamics. And that's easier to have when more people are in one place and can interact with each other rather than sort of off doing their own thing, running their own lives, as a lot of them do in the comics. They all have, their individual books, which are really fun. I love reading them. But for this one, we needed everybody together. So we created some reference material, fully with DC in the loop, coming to them with questions. Can we do this? Can we have this person? I remember a big one for me when we were starting, because this was 2021 and Alfred had just died in the main continuity. Spoilers. I'm so sorry, anybody who does not know that. It's been a little while, but he had just died and we're putting this together. And I'm asking our producer, Susan, can we have Alfred? Because he's, central to the Bat family. And DC came back immediately and said, yes, you can have Alfred, please. So just figuring out all those pieces was definitely an interesting process because there was a lot to consider. But we were looking for those moments of, okay, we want them to be in a place in their lives where they can grow and they can make mistakes and learn from them. And it's not just growth in their roles as superheroes, but also their growth just as people out in the world. And that's what informed a lot of the decisions we were making.
Cool. And that it's interesting you bring up Alfred. Actually, I'm going to jump ahead because I had Alfred and Batman, both those characterizations, as their own little list on my question or group of my doc of questions here. Just because Alfred is very much like kind of comes across as like the cohesive element throughout the whole thing, which I feel like is a lot of people's interpretation of the character and how they see him. But I love how that plays off against, Batman or say Bruce Wayne. And what you've done with Bruce Wayne is, I like that he's more of a lighthearted paternal figure, which is something we might have seen more of years ago. And in the current comics canon, it's less of a thing. But I guess, how did you guys approach crafting, Alfred and Bruce? Because they both have that cohesive element, but, Bruce obviously is inept at tying a tie and working in the kitchen, but he has this great fatherly, role he seems to be growing into, whereas Alfred is kind of a little more straight-laced, but I hesitate to say that because he has a lot of his moments of humor too, that very, very dry humor, but
yes. I think when we were looking at that, there are sort of two different stories to tell there. And one is the relationship between Alfred and Bruce and how in the comics, Alfred was just such a steadying presence for Bruce after, his parents died, growing up. And then as he comes back into Batman and he's bringing, I'm sure, a lot of things that Alfred disapproved of back into his life. It's like, okay, you just came back to Gotham and now you want to dress up as a bat and go fight crime. This is what you choose to do. I'm sure that gave Alfred some pause. So exploring that relationship, I definitely wanted to have that feel of a little bit father-son there, because I think Alfred really did step up for Bruce as a father figure and has that sort of warm, steady presence in his life of guiding him when he needs help in however he needs help. And then I see that, especially in this comic, because we're so family centric, trickling down from Bruce to his kids, where obviously Bruce is himself healing from a lot of trauma from his childhood. And now he has all of these kids. And I think personally, that relationship, why I call them the Bat family and not just Batman's team, those relationships are built on love, absolutely, from the ground up. And I think that's true in the comics as well, that, that's the reason Bruce takes in Dick Grayson in the very beginning, is that he sees this kid and he sees himself in this kid and he doesn't want him to feel the same way that he felt. And that's an act of love in and of itself right there in the very beginning. And so Bruce obviously has a lot of learning to do personally. And I like that we get to tell stories of growth for Bruce because, it doesn't matter what age you are, you're always learning new things. You're always making mistakes and trying to grow from them. And so I love that we can tell that in the context of Bruce with his children of, he's kind of got the Batman thing down, but he's still working out the kinks for this father thing, even though, he's got about 9 children at that point. And so having Alfred there behind him, just to give him encouragement and say, you got this. It's okay that you're not perfect all the time, even though Bruce is the definition of a perfectionist. Having someone to remind him, it's okay, I think is just really lovely. And obviously, Alfred's relationship with the Bat family goes far beyond Bruce. He's such a wonderful presence and mentor for all of the kids. And it was really important, as I was saying earlier, to have him because of that role that he plays for all of them.
One of the things I love that, you did with Alfred specifically, well, and I guess Bruce at the same time because they're both in the same issue. But there's an issue where Alfred is visiting some friends, and it turns out it's Clark Kent's adopted parents. And
Yeah.
I love that because you kind of see like the difference there, where in that one, Bruce and Clark are very much like big kids in their own right. They still have traits of, they've been carrying with them seemingly their whole life. And here's Alfred and the Kents. And that's something admittedly I haven't seen before, like those two parties hanging out. I mean, obviously Superman and Batman, that's a classic, but the Kents and Alfred it was just a very wonderful issue to read, and I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a headcanon on my part, but I just love the idea that after Bruce started coming home and he's like, oh, there's this alien out there and I got to learn more about him. And as Bruce was developing that relationship with Clark, that Alfred was also sort of on the slide developing that relationship with Ma and Pa Kent, encouraging. They're like, okay, we're going to figure out how our kids are going to hang out and they're going to be friends with each other. And can you let me know if Bruce ends up crashing at your place after they're done fighting Darkseid, or should Clark come over here? Just coordinating all those little things behind the scenes. I fully believe that is something that Alfred would do, looking out for Bruce, and vice versa. Clark's parents would do for him, just because they are those kinds of caring people. And why wouldn't they have each other's phone numbers on speed dial when they know that their sons are out there fighting all the evils in the world and they need some updates?
Yeah, it was so much fun to read. Do you have, other than the ones we've mentioned, do you have any, favorite issues of yours that are really kind of near and dear?
Ooh, definitely yes. I think, a Last Cookie is that's episode 2 of season 1. That one is definitely up there for me because that was actually the first script that I ever submitted. So that one just has a special place in my heart. I also really love Recovery, which is the episode where Bruce has an injury and it sort of roles a reverse, where instead of the parent is trying to keep the kids from sneaking out, all the kids are trying to keep Bruce from sneaking out. And I love that one because it was a perfect example of, sometimes I write something on a page and I hand it over to Starbite, and it feels like he pulled it from my head and just gets it exactly as I was picturing it in the panel. And the ending of that comic, where Jason is standing there with the tire iron and all the tires in the Batcave are gone, it was just exactly how I pictured it. And it made me so happy to have that one come back and just, yes, like that was what I wanted. So I really love that episode. And then there's one that came out pretty recently, No Doors Allowed. That was, I think, one of the last ones that just came out from behind the paywall, that I really love, because Jason and Cass as Chaos Twins is just beautiful. So that one was fun to write.
You mentioned, when you pass the script off, can you, when it comes to creating a new issue, can you walk us through kind of the behind the scenes details on, your process with Starbite and the creative team?
Yeah, absolutely. So, starts with me. I write the script. We work on that usually. Sometimes there's a couple drafts. Sometimes, a lot of the times with the humor ones, we're like, okay, we got this one. Like, let's move forward with it. And then from there, it goes to Starbite, or Toby, depending on who is doing the inks for that episode. And that's where we get to see the drawings of the characters, with no colors at that point, but sort of all of the big things in the foreground that are coming in. And there might be some notes that go on there if, we've changed some things in the script or it's not quite what we were looking for. But most of the time it comes back and we look at it and go, yep, 100%. That was it. Nailed it. And then from there, we get some layers coming in. The colors come in next. And I was new to comics creation, and I was astounded how much of a difference it makes to the tone of the comic, seeing the colors come into it. Because muted tones versus more vibrant tones changes everything about how it can be read. So that was really cool to see that process. And then we get backgrounds coming in after that, and lettering that comes in at the very end. And something that I love this part of the process is seeing it come in layer by layer and then getting to see the finished product. That's when I start to notice all of the Easter eggs that every other member of the team has started putting into the comic that are not necessarily things that are in the script. They're just, I think I'm going to add, when we were doing Jason's apartment in one episode, they put a Batmobile tire in the background, which was just beautiful when I noticed it for the first time. And things like that, where there's always just a little something extra in the background that I hadn't seen before when I finally get to see the finished product. So that's such a cool process of watching it just be built piece by piece by piece and seeing all the love and skill that goes into that, because, oh my gosh, these people are so talented. It is incredible. I love getting to work with them.
Yeah, it's amazing, seeing the final product and everything, and those references and little Easter eggs, and you could really kind of get a glean too for people's influences too. I've noticed in there. I got excited when I can't remember what episode it was in, but there was an '89 Batmobile, and I was like, oh,
yeah, yeah. There's so much history in Batman's, and we all love Batman, and we all love different parts of Batman. So it's fun to get to see everybody's little fun things from canon pop in.
And something I wanted to circle back to, now that, we talked about, it's a family book, and it's like a family, unit, and everything kind of comes back to that. You mentioned it earlier, coming back to family. One of the things, and this might be me reading or revealing my hand by reading too much into things, but I don't think so, is this idea of, it comes back to again and again in a lot of stories, this idea of not forging ahead alone and shouldering the burden, and it's been in stories about Batman, Batgirl, Bluebird, and other characters. It's this idea of not taking the world on all by yourself and allowing yourself to trust others, which is, for a lot of people difficult to do, and probably more so for members of the Bat family, based on their histories, and it feels both timeless and timely, and it's like this through line throughout both seasons, and I'm assuming that was intentional, and that's something that's constantly on the forefront, is this difference of doing things alone versus trying to connect and struggling to rely on each other when your instincts might not be so.
Yes, absolutely, very intentional on our part. A sort of unwritten rule that I set for myself when I was writing season 1 and have carried into season 2 is that I didn't want any of the characters solving problems alone. There had to be at least one other person in there with them, helping them figure things out, because I think that is really true to real life, that very rarely are we in situations where we are, in a silo, in a vacuum, and we only have ourselves to rely on. And a lot of the times, either, directly or indirectly, there are outside influences that make a difference in how we respond to things or approach things, or even in how we react to failure and learn from our mistakes. So it was very intentional, because we knew that so many of these stories were going to be relationship centered. I was making a very intentional effort to always have another member of the Bat family present for helping to solve things, even if it's just to be an ear to listen. And I do think that's important, because a lot of the solo books that we see in DC, a lot of the times, because they are solo books, they are the characters solving things alone. And I love those stories. I love to see, how is Batman going to come back from this and make everything work? How is he going to do it? But because, it's Wayne family adventures, it's not just about Batman. We really wanted to make sure that it was about family. It was about them leaning on each other, even when that was hard to do. It's hard to sometimes admit that you've done something wrong, or that you have insecurities, or there's a problem that you can't solve. But they have such strong relationships with each other in canon, in the comics, going back years and years and years. And so being able to lean into that has been really amazing. And I've loved, that's one of my favorite parts about writing these, is figuring out how all these relationships fit together.
Well, it's fantastic. It's, as I really enjoyed reading that, and I love that aspect to it. And it's kind of endeared me to the series, seeing that, because, in the comic side of things, one of my favorite more recent runs was James Tynion's run on Detective Comics, which was very much the family book as opposed to a lot of the solo adventures. And so this, really hits that groove for me, where it's, because I do think it's harder, when you have to rely on people or open up and be, vulnerable about, issues. So it is, very much appreciated. And I know we're fans of the series at the Batman universe. And speaking of fans, it seems like online it's, kind of well loved and well received, and it looks like it's striking an emotional chord with a lot of readers, and as a writer, are you paying attention to those things? Are you having reactions to that? Are you, following any buzz?
Yes and no, I guess. I remember being extraordinarily nervous as the release date for season 1 was coming out, because I couldn't decide what was going to be worse, if people read it and responded to it, or if no one read it at all. And I was so nervous. I didn't know which was, in my wild imaginings. And so seeing this comic get such an incredible response has been, I honestly don't have the words for it. It's been amazing. And this was absolutely through and through, for every member of this team, a labor of love. And we wanted to create something for fans who have, I know I personally have been wanting to see something like this for years, where we just get small moments with the Bat family alongside all the amazing stuff that's already happening in the comics, where they get to go out and fight as superheroes. So that has been extremely gratifying to see people respond and show their love for the comic, because, as I said, it's coming from a place of love from all of us. I don't really follow, day-to-day conversations on the internet, or really look at comments or anything. It makes me too nervous to look at comments. So mostly not paying too much attention to that, or trying not to. Sometimes I fail, but so yes, I guess the answer is yes and no to that question.
Are there any, stories coming up that are on the cusp of being released that you're excited for fans to react to? Are there any ones that stand out that you could spill a little on?
I can't say much. I will say there will be some more cameos that I'm excited for. That I think one of the great things about working with DC is, they have a huge roster of characters, and every time we've gone to them and asked, hey, can we use this person? They have come back and said, yes, go for it. Even if they weren't a character who's, in the Bat family or associated with the Bat family. So that's really cool. So we'll have some more cameos coming up, and we're going to be continuing with the more personal arcs as well. And those are I think the most rewarding, but also the most challenging arcs to write. So I'm excited. There's some in the works that I'm pretty excited for, but that's really all I can say about it.
And are there any dream characters you'd love to write someday? Whether that be in an unannounced, Wayne Family Adventures continuation or another project or.
Ooh, I've always been a huge fan of the Teen Titans. Just absolutely love the Teen Titans. So getting to write some of those characters, Raven, Starfire, Beast Boy, Cyborg, all those guys. I think that would be pretty amazing. Those characters are so fun. And I love that their relationship with, depending on, who their Robin is, all the different Robins, which is really fun too.
That would be fun. Do you have a favorite character you're currently writing? Like out of the Bat family, is there one that you holds an extra special place?
That is the meanest question. How dare you ask me that? Making me choose one. I really struggle with this question because, I have, friends have asked me that before. And I'll name a character and then I'll be like, oh, no, wait, but actually this other one's really cool. Oh, but then this person does this really cool thing and I love that. So I go back and forth all the time. I know this sounds cliche, but I cannot choose one. It's because they're all so different. Like they all have these amazing backstories and histories and things that they do that none of the others do. And so it's really hard for me. It's hard for me to choose one. I'm sorry.
No, I think that's a fair answer because actually I asked you that question and then I was thinking, well, if I was on the other side of this, how would I answer that? And then I was thinking, well, I mean, I could relate to like, maybe Tim Drake on this one aspect, but then I really, can relate in this other arena. Or then there's like, a fan favorite for Ian, who does the reviews on the site. He is a big Stephanie Brown fan. That is like
nice.
Anything with Steph, like he is there. But, and then I was thinking like, she's so fun in Wayne Family Adventures. Like she's, I like Steph. I haven't read as much as Ian has, but like reading Wayne Family Adventures, I'm like, man, Steph is awesome. So, but I could see that though. Like, it's just, there's, so many different parts of each character that you might, feel connected to in, more ways than one.
Yeah, it's always really fun because I'll write, one episode that's really centered on, let's say Tim Drake, and I'll get really, dive really into that. And then the next episode is going to be about Jason or Cass or whoever. And then I dive really deep into that one. So it's hard for me to just choose one of them to love because they all have, I think, as you said, there's just aspects of each of them that are so relatable. And it's hard to just separate those out and say just the one.
As a writer too, I wanted to ask, how long, you've been writing and what kind of inspirations and works, do you feel have been influential on your style, as you've, been working?
That's a good question. I think just in terms of inspiration for episodes, I read so many comics and reread so many comics, because I think one of the amazing things about working in the Batman universe is that there's so much material that so many great minds have already created. And there's a lot there that, we can look at and say, I want to see more of that, or I want to explore that in a different way. And just a lot of reading just a wide range of Batman and Bat family books. There's a lot of where our episode ideas come from. I think a really good example of that is I think it's the Batman and Robin run. That's where we get to see for like 2 panels, like a redheaded Jason Todd reading Pride and Prejudice in a prison yard. And I read that comic, years ago, long before I started writing for this. And that stuck with me. There's really no attention that's drawn to the fact that he's reading Pride and Prejudice. You can see the book title, but nobody really talks about it in the comic. And so, we're writing season 1, and I'm writing an episode about how Damien's hunting for blackmail about people. And that's what pops up for me. It's like, let's see what we can do with this little piece there. So I definitely just feel that I've been pretty heavily influenced by a lot of the comics, canon, or things that were canon. The DC timeline is a little fluid, that has come before me, because there's so much there, and there's so many wonderful things there to pull from. So I definitely have not been hurting for inspiration.
Nice. And I will say Pride and Prejudice is a good book.
It's an amazing book. Love it.
Oh, we covered a lot of ground too. I was going to ask you about the cameos, but we already covered that. I'm glad to hear that there are more coming, because I had a lot of fun with the ones that were in there. Even like surprise cameos, like, the Justice League, they showed up a few times. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Catwoman, Harley Quinn, and Scarecrow, but Zatanna and Copperhead were fun ones that I really appreciated seeing, that among others. But
yeah, I for Copperhead, that was one where I was sitting there, I was like, which villain do I want crashing into this magic show? And I was like, let's choose someone that we don't see a lot. So Copperhead is the one who made the cut.
And then so I have 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up, because I know we're running tight on time.
Yeah.
The first one's the easy one. How many episodes can we anticipate in season 2 of Wayne Family Adventures?
I don't know if I can get into specifics. There are still quite a few episodes that are going to be coming out. So there's going to be a lot more content. Don't worry.
Awesome. And then, when you're mentioning reading a lot of Batman universe books and, works with different characters, what are some solid reads that you would love to share with our Batman listeners?
Ooh, that's a good question. First of all, I gotta say, it all depends on what kinds of stories you love to read, because, if you love detective stories, you're going to find some of those in Batman. If you love something dark and gritty and moody, you'll find those too. If you love stuff that's more lighthearted, it's all there. So I have to preface with that, because everybody loves different things, and they definitely can find all of those. Personally, I am a big fan of detective Batman stories. I love Long Halloween. I really love Hush as well. That's a great story. I truly adore the Batgirl run by Kelly Puckett. Great read. That's Cass as Batgirl. It's awesome. Huge fan of the Teen Titans. I'll read pretty much anything that comes out with Teen Titans. And some of the current books are amazing. There's a Batgirls run right now with Cass and Steph as Batgirls together, which has been so fun. And there's just so much humor laced throughout that one. The current Nightwing run, having a great time with that as well. I love his dog, Haley, is just so cute. Just everything that's going on there. It's been really good. So yeah, there's a lot of good reads out there. And I think, when I was first starting to read comics, one of the best things that somebody told me was, you're not going to love everything that everyone else loves, and that's okay. You'll keep reading, you'll find stories that work for you, that you love. And I think that's just so true. There's so much wonderful Batman content out there, and Bat Family content, and everybody can find something that works for what they're looking for.
There's a Bat Family for everybody.
There is.
Well, I wanted to say thank you for joining me on the Batman Universe podcast. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. This has been a blast. Thank you.
For listeners, you can find Batman Wayne Family Adventures on the Webtoon app with new episodes dropping every Thursday. For more podcast episodes like this one, as well as reviews of both regular comic issues and Wayne Family Adventures episodes by my colleagues, check out thebatmanuniverse.net. And thanks again for listening.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed that latest interview from the Batman Universe. Thank you to CRC Payne, as well as Webtoon for helping arrange this interview so that you guys could hear them talk about this awesome project that has been going on for quite some time that hopefully you guys are checking out. So be sure to check it out over at Webtoon. With all of that being said, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Batman Universe podcast. I want to encourage you guys to head over to our website, thebatmanuniverse.net, for all kinds of news, original content, editorials, reviews, other podcasts, all related to the Bat family and other aspects of the fandom, including movies, television, video games, merchandise, and everything else, as well as the comics, most importantly. Outside of that, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Discord, YouTube, all over the place. All of our social links can be found at the top of the website over at thebatmanuniverse.net. If you are listening to this podcast and you'd like to send us a comment, feel free to leave the comment wherever you're listening to this because it does come back to us. You can also email us at tbu@thebatmanuniverse.net. If you're interested in supporting us in any way, shape, or form, there are links in the episode description as well as over on YouTube, and you could just head over to our website and look for the Support TBU spot on the homepage. With all that being said, thank you so much again to Scott for performing this interview, and we will see you guys next time.